One of the questions that I'm constantly asked is about how to segue into sharing an example when you're asked a question, be it at a meeting, a panel, or an interview. Let me share an example of this, which I heard in a conversation between a father and a son. Welcome back to my Thursday video series, where I share examples for you to use at work to make your messaging sticky. Devi Shetty, the chairman and founder of Narayana Health, was in a conversation with his son, Viren Shetty, the vice chairman, and he asked his question about a time 8 to 10 years back when Viren had just come back from Stanford. Now, Narayana Health at that time had spent huge amounts of money in building a digital platform, but they weren't reaching anywhere. And one day, Viren comes and speaks to his dad, and he says, "We are not reaching anywhere. We should start our own software subsidiary." Devi Shetty was opposed to the idea. Viren and Devi Shetty had a lot of conversation and fights over it. But in the end, Viren went ahead and hired software engineers and started this venture without Devi Shetty's consent. So Devi Shetty's question to Viren was, it was a big risk that you had taken. So what gave you the confidence to go against your father and build the software business? So Viren replies, talking about a time when he was in his undergrad doing engineering at one of the colleges in Bangalore, and there wasn't much work. So Viren would be floating around, and his dad saw that he was wasting time. So he told him, "You're wasting time. Come to the hospital to do some work." So Viren would go to the hospital, and because he was not a computer engineer, he was not even a biomedical engineer, he was doing civil engineering. He was told to go to the generator room at the back of the hospital where a bunch of engineers like him were there and where he could go and see how the hospital works and learn how the hospital is built. So we did this, and he says, I was doing college part time, so I would finish classes early, sometimes bunk, and go and sit at the generator shed room. So one of the things that he observed, he says, was our hospital was in the absolute edge of town. So when power cuts, which were very frequent, happened, the power would go off and the UPS would have to come on. And there was a gap between the time that the UPS comes on and the generator comes on, because the generator at that time didn't have a shield. And there was a button called auto start, which was a really useless auto start mechanism. So whenever the power went, the lights would first go off in their office. And then everyone in that tiny generator room office would be like this. And they would wait, because if the generator didn't start, people would start dying in the hospital. So they would wait and they would count for about 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3. And that's as much time, because the UPS also, there was a good chance that it'll crank out. So if it doesn't work, they would run around like headless chicken, go to the generator and manually crank it up to start. And he says, I could see this happen time and time again. Now, what does that have to do with software? Is that Viren says we were dependent on third-party providers. And since Devi Shetty had insisted that the group had to have a software which was cloud hosted, and the vendor was not competent enough to build something that could run on the cloud, so they would have outages. So just like what was happening in the generator shed, an outage would happen, everybody would run around like a headless chicken. This was happening time and time again in the company's software. The software would go out, it would have an outage, the network would give some issue, the doctors would not get their records on time, patients would start screaming, the lines would build up, and it was a ridiculous scenario. So what Viren didn't tell Dr. Shetty was that the team had a little bit more ambitious plans than just building a software for that hospital. They wanted to build a software for all the hospitals in the world. And while he initially did tell Dr. Devi Shetty that he was building a temporary patch, they would go and do a full top to bottom rewrite and build the whole thing from scratch So it was scalable, it could grow, and he attributes this why Narayana Health was really far ahead digitally. So while initially it was driven from desperation, he says he always had a sense that we could do something really interesting. What a great example capturing the trigger, the thought process, and the action taken. Now, where at work could you use this example? You could share it with your teams not to accept status quo or keep band-aiding issues, but to go to the core issue and work towards creating scalable solutions, not just a temporary patch. In what other context would you use this example? Do share in the comments and let me know.